show the roadmap. So for that reason, we're delighted.
The Infrastructure Master Plan is a 30-year plan designed to meet the inadequacies of the sector through public-private partnership and is expected to cost about $1 trillion. And the International Monetary Fund (IMF) in its latest World Economic Outlook said global growth prospects are uneven across the main countries and regions. The global lender said in advanced economies, growth is projected to be stronger in 2015 relative to 2014, but in emerging markets and developing economies, it is expected to be weaker.
Global growth in 2015 is going to be more or less the same as in 2014, about 3.5%. That's not bad, that's not great. Now, if you look at the numbers behind this global number, it's clear that advanced economies are going to do better. So our forecast for this year is 2.4% as opposed to 1.8% last year, a fairly substantial increase. And then for emerging market economies, it goes the other way.
In terms of headline numbers, global growth is forecast to rise moderately in 2015 to 2016, from 3.4% in 2014 to 3.5% in 2015 and 3.8% in 2016, broadly unchanged relative to the January 2015 World Economic Outlook update. This aggregate number, however, masks the diversity of underlying evolutions. The increase in global growth in 2015 will be driven by a rebound in advanced economies, the report notes, supported by the decline in oil prices. After weak second and third quarters in 2014, growth in the euro area is showing signs of picking up, supported by lower oil prices, low interest rates, and a weaker euro. And after a disappointing 2014, growth in Japan is also projected to pick up by a weaker yen and lower oil prices. Growth forecast for most emerging and developing economies are slightly worse than last year. Growth is projected to slow from 4.6% in 2014 to 4.3% in 2015. The decline in growth reflects a variety of factors. Unlike in advanced economies, a more limited pass-through to consumers of the windfall gains from lower oil prices is expected to mute the attendant boost to growth in many emerging markets and developing oil importers. Growth in low-income countries as a group, however, has stayed high. Growth is expected to slow only slightly at 5.5% in 2015 from 6% in 2014, and then to rebound in 2016, partly on account of increased external demand from advanced economies' trading partners. And before we go, a quick look at closing figures from the Nigerian Stock Exchange, where it dipped by 0.42%. That rounds it up. Good morning, Nigeria will continue shortly. My name is Leah Katung Babatunde.
Okay, thank you very much there, Leah Katung Babatunde, for the business package. And next for us now is a review of today's newspapers. Bayo Atoyebe, the Good Morning Nigeria newspaper reviewer, is right here with us in the studios for today's edition. Bayo, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Kingsley.
Good morning, Nigeria.
Okay, we begin our review this morning with This Day newspaper. This Day has as its lead story, "The World Remembers Chibok Girls," and three riders to that. 219 girls stage march to Education Ministry 219 obviously represents the number of the girls who are yet to be rescued. Federal government committed to their rescue, says Okonjo Iweala. And Dasuki is the National Security Advisor, military to liberate Sambisa forest before May 29th. There are photographs on the front page there, but the stories can be found in greater detail inside the paper. Now, above the name flag of this day newspaper, there are three other stories. Buhari to end fuel subsidy and rationalize MDAs. Buhari to end fuel subsidy and rationalize MDAs. Now, says power transmission to be decentralized and to announce cabinet 1 week after swearing in. Now, Supreme Court verdict, Fayose and PDP celebrate. That's on page 8. An Amnesty report, that's the kicker, 2,000 girls and women abducted since 2014. That can be found on page 10. Claire?
All right, we'll look at The Guardian's front page, and it leads with UN Reps Shoyinka Utomi seek release of Chibok girls. And indeed, all the papers here carry this story on their front pages. But this is the version of The Guardian. It has a rider to that. Government committed to rescuing the abducted students, says Okonjo Iweala. Of course, it's the lead story on the front page. Supreme Court upholds Fayose's re-election. 2 riders trail it. PDP government hail verdict and mid jubilation in Ekiti. APC Speaker Omiri urges respect of verdict. And that's the picture story just below the masthead there. Former President of Niger Republic, Muhammadu Usman, and his delegation on a visit to President-elect General Muhammadu Buhari in his hometown, Daura, in Katsina yesterday. And on the inside, on page 7, you will find what The Guardian has classified as Governor's Class 2015 to 2019, and all the winning governorship candidates, spread out there on page 7. All right. Kingsley.
Vanguard is the next paper for us. Vanguard, just below the name flag. Fayose in victory dance. Supreme Court validates his election. That can be found in greater detail on page 11. But the lead story says Buhari to move against pension for ex-governors. Says Nigeria can't survive under the pensions. It's a welcome proposal. That's according to Kayamo. And also on the front page there, Enugu government abandons judges. That's a story in the southeast. And military to liberate Sambisa forest before May 29th. Again, that's according to Dasuki. And Ijo and the Shakiri youths clash again over EPZ site. That detail is to be found on page 13 of Vanguard. Claire.
Right, a New Telegraph is asking a very rhetorical question on its front page. And dead or alive, that's the way it captions its own story on the Chibok girls. And has the rider, Nigeria, the world ponder fate of over 200 Chibok girls 365 days after abduction. Details on page 2. And the picture story of some children who participated in the protest march to commemorate the first anniversary of the abducted Chibok girls in Abuja yesterday. The other stories just below the masthead there, you find Fayose wins at Supreme Court, jubilation in Ekiti. It's on page 7. And IMF retains Nigeria's 2015 growth at 4.8%. Tinsley.
Yeah, Daily Trust has on its front page, Sultan urges politicians to work for masses. And Nigeria in 3.7 billion naira nuclear power deal with Russia. That can be found on page 27 of the Daily Trust newspaper. Lead story, of course, says NSA, troops will clear Sambisa before May 29th. And 2 riders to that, Chibok traumatized and haunted. That's according to the community. And missing girls remembered around the world. Also on the front page there, Governor Lamido hosts Sheriff and Kalu in Dutse. That's on page 3. And on page 21, APC NWC, that's the working committee, National Working Committee members meet over smooth transition. And on page 3 as well, 3 killed as youth celebrate APC's victory in Kaduna.
Okay, Nigerian Tribune again says Chibok girls, global outrage persists. It had several riders there, UK, Ireland, United Nations, European Union, Malala others slam government. Over 2,000 girls, women forced into Boko Haram, Amnesty International, and Soyinka Utomi Oke-Odumakin task Buhari on page 42. Military to liberate Sambisa Forest before May 29, and this is coming from the NSA. Details on page 42. Again, picture stories of the Chibok girls ambassadors at a rally in Abuja on Tuesday. And just on the other side of the paper, violence as factional TUC and forces strike in Osun State, southwest Nigeria. Details on page 4. Another story is trending at just below the masthead. Jubilation in Ekiti as Fawashe wins in Supreme Court. Impeachment not grounds for disqualification, court says. It's on page 15 and 16. And other stories there. Oando records 82% increase in reserves. Declare me winner, Okorocha tells INEC, page 45. And Akwa Ibom election free, fair, INEC observers. And Kingsley was wondering with the shape of this young lady's mouth, what she could be saying.
Well, that's it's part of the agony that it's going through everybody's mind at this time with respect to the 219 girls still unaccounted for. The Nation newspaper is next for us, and the lead story says Chibok parents to Buhari. Chibok parents to Buhari, you can rescue our girls. And kids and others march on education ministry in Abuja. Now, also on the front page there of the Nation newspaper, diaspora remittances growth to slow. That was on page 53. And reps passed 60 billion naira NCC budget. That's also on page 63. Now, there's a business copy there on the front page. Owando's 32% reserves increase. Good for shareholders. That's is in inverted commas. Very interesting on the front page there, promoted on the front page, but in greater detail on page 4. Jonathan rejects Constitution amendment. That story is to be found in greater detail on page 4. And the President Jonathan is reported to have declined to give his assent to the amendments to the Constitution because the amendments do not satisfy the strict requirements of Section 9, subsection 3 of the 1999 Constitution as earlier amended. Now, the President listed 12 errors in the amendments. That's on page 4. He listed 12 errors to the amendments and faulting also some of the amendments which tended to give executive powers and duties to the legislature and the judiciary. So, President Goodluck Jonathan has declined to give his assent to the amendments already passed by both chambers of the National Assembly. Back to the front page, you have some other stories there. And then on page 5 and 7, you have other stories. Olanusi sues Mimiko for stopping allowances. And Borofish, Mimiko plotting to impeach deputy. These are stories you can find on page 7 of the Nation newspaper. Claire.
Okay, Newswatch Times leads with the story on the front page. Soyinka to Buhari, rescue abducted Chibok girls. It has a rider, military to liberate Sambisa Forest before May 29, NSA. And again, the picture story right there. Nollywood actress Fuluke Daramola, Nigerian hip-hop artist Neto Chikwe, Nobel laureate Professor Wole Soyinka, and founder Center for Values in Leadership Professor Pat Utomi, as well as President Women and Rights for Change Initiative Dr. Joe Oke-Odumakin and others. That was, of course, during the commemoration of the one-year anniversary in Lagos yesterday. Enugu Assembly in stormy session as government's probe resumes. Summons Accountant General. Details on page 2. Ondo people's wish on assembly polls subverted. And this is coming from APC. You can find details on page 4. Now, curfew in Kaduna over violence. Details on page 4 as well. And the story trending above the masthead. Nigeria in $20 billion nuclear power talks with Russia.
Okay, the next paper for us is leadership. The leadership on this front page has stories on the Chibok girls similar to the headlines that we had read earlier. So I just run to the inside pages of the leadership newspapers. Very quickly, go to page 9. Page 9 of leadership. Page 9. ABU appoints new vice-chancellor. That's there on page 9 of Leadership newspaper. And INEC holds runoff in Taraba. That's the governorship election. INEC holds runoff in Taraba April the 25th. And that's where the female candidate, Mr. Senator, will have a chance again, of contesting the election and getting the final outcome of what happens. Now, that's INEC holds runoff in Taraba April the 25th. And on page 11, this is a business copy. This is a business copy. Fuel scarcity bites harder in Abuja, and CBN cuts overseas spending to $50,000 annually. Now, this has to do with, it said, the annual limit on the usage of, that's the second paragraph now, the annual limit on the usage of Naira-denominated cards, which was initially $150,000, has been cut down to $50,000, while the daily card usage limit has been brought down to $300 per person. Now, CBN cuts overseas spending to $50,000 per person. Claire, I think that's the much we can take, and then we'll go back to Bayo now.
Also carrying the story on the Chibok Red Day on its front page. But just treading at the bottom, you have anger in PDP. Top members ask NWC to resign or be sacked. And Masob warns Danjuma and Oba of Lagos. That's, of course, trending at the bottom there. You can find it to go by Supreme Court affirms Fauci's victory. And Bayo, I wouldn't say I'm discouraged by the performance of women in this election. The women who have come out have really put in a good show, particularly the governorship candidate in Taraba, unlike what Kingsley, had said earlier on.
Like what? What did I say?
Well,
I didn't say. I mean, it's a contest.
Yes.
And the contest is not over. Yes.
Well, it would have been a unique history. In fact, on the social media, there were reports that the female candidate in Taraba was leading in 3 prominent local government areas, but they required to win at least by the constitutional provision, 2/3 of those states to emerge a winner. Don't forget that election there has been inconclusive, and 25th of this month has been fixed for a rerun of the election. But you see, wishes are horses, but for the electoral offices, it's not necessarily for the affirmative action. It is left for the voters to decide. Yesterday was Red Day.
I'm sorry, Claire is disappointed by your response.
Well, the facts...
No, I know, Bayo and Kingsley. I know by the next election that Nigeria will have more women, come out and show. But at least right now, we've seen that we have women who are capable of also, leading, at that level of government.
That reminds me, Hillary Clinton has indicated her wish to contest in the American election. In this climb, we used to say he has thrown his hat into the ring. What do we say in this case? Do we say headgear? What do we say he has thrown into the ring?
Women also wear hats. So
thrown her hat into the ring.
That's correct, yes.
I thought I had an ally in Bayo, but you've told me I must keep my...
No, I'm trying to give instances about
let's quickly get on with the review. Thank you.
Well, yesterday was for remembrance of our girls, 219, who are still being held arbitrarily by insurgents. 219 girls claiming red T-shirts, each representing one of the 219 girls because they had their names written on it, went to the Ministry of Education in solidarity rally. Also in Lagos, Professor Wole Soyinka lead other competitors to remind the world and Nigeria about the need to get the girls released. In Paris, there were demonstrations. There was also demonstration at Nigeria House in London, and the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said the world must never forget the kidnapped Chibok girls. Some parents of the Chibok girls were at the Ministry of Finance in Abuja yesterday, and they were assured by the permanent secretary who represented the minister that government will not forget and give up the initiative to rescue their daughters. The permanent secretary added, yes, administration may change, but government is continuous, and the Nigerian government that will come in will continue with the initiative. Meanwhile, the National Security Advisor, Colonel Sambo Dasuki, retired, has said that the initiative of the army is centered on Sambisa Forest, and he has promised before May 29th handover date, Sambisa Forest, the last stronghold of insurgents, the last camp, will be liberated. He also indicated that there are over 2,000 persons that have been kidnapped, and therefore boys, girls, men and women that have been abducted by the insurgents will be the target and the concern of soldiers who are hoping to liberate Sambisa forest and will comb everywhere for any information and the presence of kidnapped persons. The Supreme Court has upheld that the impeachment of Governor Ayo Fayose was not a ground to disqualify him to contest. And that landmark decision has brought out certain legal prominence. First, impeachment is not a ground to disqualify a candidate to contest. Only a court of law or the Code of Conduct Tribunal can find a person guilty and therefore preclude from contesting the election for a period of 10 years. In a landmark judgment delivered led by Justice Sylvester Nguga, the Supreme Court said failure to charge the then Governor Fayose before Code of Conduct Tribunal made it impossible to bar him from seeking elective office. Meanwhile, in Ado-Ekiti, Governor Fayose led jubilation around Ado-Ekiti. He praised the Chief Justice of Nigeria for upholding democracy and not allowing the abuse of judiciary to change the outcome of elections. Dr. Adewale Omiri, the embattled speaker of the 19 APC members, had called on members of the APC and the Ekiti people to respect the judgment of the Apex Courts. Meanwhile, the 19 APC legislators have withdrawn a case they filed in the Federal High Court in Lagos to seek that the impeachment of Speaker Omiri was illegal, null and void. No pronouncement has been made on the current initiative to impeach the governor by the 19 APC legislators. The PDP governorship candidate in Kano, Malam Segiri Take, has congratulated Professor Abdullahi Umaru Ganduje of the APC. Similarly, Ambassador Abdullah Wali of Sokoto PDP has also congratulated Speaker Aminu Waziri Tamwal on the outcome of the election in Sokoto. Governor-elect Ganduje described Takai's goodwill message as the spirit of good sportsmanship. Governor Babangida Aliyu of Niger State has also congratulated the governor-elect of Sani Bello of Niger State. However, a pro-democracy group, Coalition for Niger Delta for Justice and Development, has called on aggrieved APC candidates who lost elections to accept defeat in good faith. The national coordinator, Ebiako Barele, urged APC candidates in Enugu, Gombe, Rivers, Ekiti, Ondo, and Akwa Ibom to accept defeat and congratulate their opponents as good sportsmen. He says this is the only way to strengthen national unity, development, and progress, and to bury personal ambition and allow patriotism to lead us all. However, in Rivers State, the APC governorship candidate, Mr. Dakuku Peters, has said that the electoral fraud that was perpetrated in Rivers cannot be accepted. He said it was too early to celebrate as the era of people getting away with electoral fraud is over. He says his party is going to court to seek justice and for the Rivers people. Curfew has been imposed in Saminaka. There were violence reported there, and the governor-elect in Kaduna, El Rufai, has appealed that they should bury their hatchet and let peace reign. Finally, Claire, some Igbo who were guests to the Oba of Lagos, Rewan Lukuman, has said that the comment the Oba made was meant to be a joke. Barrister Chukwudi Atueyi, who said, "I was there at the meeting, and what the Oba said was not to all the Igbos in Lagos, but was to us who were with him and his friends." He said, in fact, after he said it, we all clapped and laughed about it. He said, "I am particularly embarrassed that some people with political motive was being unfair because they recorded that message and played it out to the people and gave it a different interpretation altogether." Now, we see the concern here is that we are so emotive about politics that sometimes we overlook joke and take everything seriously.
Bayo, I really wish we had more time to talk about some of the issues that you have reviewed. But I'd like to thank you as usual for coming to review our newspapers. We'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you for having me.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria, and coming up ahead will be the talking points in our conversation this morning. Stay with us.
Cooking. Let's help her. Wait! My mama says before touching food, you should wash your hands with soap.
But my hands are clean.
I can't see germs, but they're everywhere.
Look under special blue light. To protect against germs, I recommend regularly use soap. Safeguard removes millions of germs, and additionally, it inhibits regrowth of germs that might cause skin rashes for hours.
That is why me, mommy, daddy, and my brother regularly use Safeguard.
Safeguard with double protection against germs.
Afraid to leak up all night, turning left and right. I need a better night. Always at night locks liquid in, unlike tissues that stain through. No stains, no check, up to 8 hours. With always my nights are better, with always my mornings brighter. What a good morning. Stay happy always.
Always. Quality brand by P&G.
Do you know that you are exposed to up to 100 illness-causing germs every day?
I encourage my kids to learn new things, and if they get hurt, I rely on my Dettol to fight germs. It's like my own first aid kit.
My family needs protection from germs. My Dettol disinfects surfaces and clothes, keeping them clean and safe from germs.
All right, precisely on May 29, General Muhammadu Buhari will make history as the first person in an opposition party to be sworn in as the next civilian president of Nigeria. Now, to facilitate smooth takeover of government from the incumbent president to the president-elect, transition committees have been set up by both parties. The 16-member Federal Government Transition Committee, headed by the Vice President, has already swung into action. Now, Salihu Abdullahi in this report examines the significance of transiting in a democratic society and hints on expectations of Nigerians ahead of the D-Day.
The relatively peaceful conduct of the last general elections in Nigeria, for many, remains a turning point, as the new commentary regarding the disposition of losers will to a large extent play a significant role in the stability of the nation's democracy. With about 16 years of democracy come May 29, this year, the country is expected to witness yet another transition from civilian to civilian rule.
When you look at history some years back, when somebody was told that he did not win, he would start beating the table and say, me, you know, that kind of thing. But now people have mellowed down.
And you know that our kind of politics in Nigeria is a little bit on the bad side, where we play strictly, if it is PDP, I must frustrate him because I'm an APC. If it is APC, I must frustrate him because I'm in PDP.
Kudos to General Abdulsalami Abubakar, who laid the foundation for democracy in 1999 that is now waxing stronger under the Fourth Republic. President Olusegun Obasanjo was elected the president and took over the mantle of leadership after about 16 years of consecutive military rule. He set the tone with his numerous transitional programs, which includes the retirement of many military officers holding political positions, establishment of a panel that investigated human rights violations, and the recovery of millions of dollars secreted to overseas accounts. He handed over to late President Umar Musa Yar'Adua after a failed attempt for a third term in office. Nature twisted the destiny of President Umar Musa Yar'Adua's administration as he died in office, making it impossible for one to know the kind of transition he would have driven for the country. With Goodluck Jonathan coming on board, it was all about transformation agenda targeted at all basic sectors of human life. Every transition has its peculiar features. This is not different from the imminent one between incumbent President Goodluck Jonathan and the President-elect General Muhammadu Buhari.
Well, there is an established practice in stable democracies, which also we've had the opportunity to practice before now. And that is that the incoming government and the outgoing government will have their select team who would meet and collect notes regarding the state of government administration.
Now, in 1999, I remember, when Obasanjo was elected, between February when he was elected and May 29, he set up a committee of experts and looked at various sectors of the economy, health, infrastructure, agriculture, power, blah, blah. And then, a whole blueprint was given to him before May 29.
Nigerians, no doubt, are with high expectations from the incoming administration, which already has change as its slogan.
They are facing a state of economy that has a dwindling resource. They are a state of the economy that indebtedness is getting high, the reserves are getting low, and the expectations of the people generally is very high.
A situation where we are expecting that the Nigeria of our dream will just drop on our laps by Angel Gabriel one night and we just wake up and we are there. It's not going to happen. It is what I do plus what you do, and which we watch like we watch our votes count.
General Muhammadu Buhari-led APC government will steer the affairs of the country from May 29 this year.
Okay, that's the background report there, and we have joining us in the Abuja studios to begin the conversation this morning, Ambassador Martin Uhomoibi is a retired permanent secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Ambassador Uhomoibi, I'd like to welcome you to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you so very much for having me on the show.
Thank you.
And Kingsley, also joining us from our Sokoto Network studio is Professor Nuhu Yakub. Professor Yakub is Vice Chancellor, Sokoto State University. Professor, we thank you for joining us on the program. And also joining us live from Lagos Network Center is Dr. Fasi Adetokunbo Yusuf, a development and communication expert, legal practitioner, and former commissioner for Information, Sports and Culture, Ogun State. It's nice to have you also on the program today.
Let's return to Ambassador Uhomoibi. Well, we have just about 6 weeks to the 29th of May, and obviously, one government is leaving, another is coming in. For us, this is interesting. In the past, where we had disruptions, on account of sudden changes in government, there wasn't the luxury of what we are seeing today. But we saw that in '79. We saw it again in 1999, and for the first time, one party is leaving, another party is coming on. A retired permanent secretary, this is a very busy time for your colleagues who are still in service. But obviously, what are the key objectives in having this kind of transitional arrangement, as it were, from one incoming from the incoming to the outgoing?
Well, thank you for your question, and indeed you are right to say that this is the first time that we'll have this kind of development in our great country, Nigeria, and that is true. I suppose that if you are, but don't forget that although it was from one government to another, in 2007, we had a transition of a sort.
That's right.
In 2010-11, there was also another transition of a sort. Normally what bureaucrats do is to write handing over notes in which they give the history of the state of affairs as they see it, in which they also narrate the successes and challenges that they have encountered since they have been in the last couple of years before the emergence of the new or the incoming administration. But they also have some futuristic essays on what they expect, the challenges that the incoming government will likely face, and what measures need to be taken to address those challenges. So comprehensively, I think it's a handing over note that they will be preparing and briefing the counterparts from the other side that are now coming in what they need to do and what they need to expect. So I have no doubt at all that the transition will be seamless, just like the election was seamless, against all the predictions of doomsayers who have never seen anything good about our country, Nigeria. I'm yet waiting to see anyone who will tell me in the history of democracies, a country as complex and as diverse as ours, with only 15 years of continuous democracy, with 4 or 5 elections in a run, achieve the kind of success that we have achieved in our great country. So I want to just applaud all Nigerians. And this is really speaking very frankly for the for the revolution that was achieved in Nigeria, and the very first. Those who expected doom from Nigeria are now in grief, and we wish them good luck.
All right, let's go to Sokoto, where Professor Nuhu Yakub is seated. Of course, Professor, previous transitions, like Kingsley said earlier on, didn't attract, much attention from Nigerians. So maybe I should put it this way. Many Nigerians appeared complacent about what happened in those transitions. So should Nigerians be interested in this transition, and why should they be?
I do not even think that Nigerians were very complacent about particularly the previous transitions. But this time around, of course, it is quite interesting, especially if you look at even the turnout at the polls, especially the presidential polls. You discover that so many people. In fact, we have had stories of people voting as late as 12 midnight, even sometimes going into the early hours of the following morning. So this time around, indeed, there is high expectation, just as the retired Pamsek has said. But the point about the transition this time is that Nigerians expect and actually also are able to get a kind of result they were expecting, particularly the possibility that we have now gotten to actually have a change of government. I think it is a very welcome development, and what personally I would say is to appeal to Nigerians to actually give and lend a supporting hand to the new administration. It is not going to be easy, there's no doubt about it, particularly as we are actually having this transition in a period when the economy is going down, there is high cost of living, there are so many things that the outgoing government needed to put in place, which unfortunately it could not do. But we are hoping that the new incoming administration will be able to seize the bull by the horn.
What is it? Let the government do their thing. What's in it for me? Why should I be interested? So that's probably the posture that the average Nigerian on the street will probably put up in this situation. So what is innate in this transition, that makes it distinctive?
Certainly there is a lot in the current transition. If you go back to democratic theory, for instance, going by the ideas of Larry Diamonds and so on, you actually discover that Nigeria has made a qualitative or quantum leap in terms of the democratic process. For me, as a political scientist, I have regarded what we have had since 1999 as a transition to civil rule. This time around, we are having a situation where people's votes have counted, and the electoral administration was so efficient, so effective, as to enable or to actually come out with the result that people who who ventured to go and vote expected will take place. So there is, it is just as I think the narration before this. We were all brought in. It is a revolutionary change as far as I'm concerned. It's a revolution without bloodshed. As you will expect in classical revolution. it is a it's a giant, break with the past. And therefore, people are full of expectations. I mean, there's no doubt about it. People now say, I have voted, my vote has counted, and I expect the government this time around to be able to show responsibility. And I think this is the bottom line. It is this transition is quite different from what we have had historically in this country. And I think people should actually embrace it. People should actually, appreciate it, and also work towards making sure that this change, this transition actually, achieves its objectives or brings about changes, in the political firmament of this country.
Okay, let's join now Dr. Fasi Yusuf, who was introduced earlier by Claire at the Lagos Network Center. Dr. Fasi Yusuf, right there on the right-hand side of your screen. Being on the field, canvassing for votes is one thing, winning an election is another, and then getting into government is another business altogether. Now, at the state level, we have witnessed transitions in the past. You were a former commissioner, and therefore, you were in receipt of notes from your predecessors or the permanent secretary. What are the key things that you would be looking out for in this bigger engagement of the transition from a federal government, one federal administration to another federal administration?
We expect that the outgoing administration have raised its own team, and the incoming administration also bringing forth its own theme. The two teams will be able to sit down together and address issues that normally you witness when you are transiting or moving from one administration to another. And as we have said it here, this is a unique one because for the first time we are witnessing a transition from one administration that is different to the incoming one. We're having a different political party that has never tasted power now coming on board. So it is mandatory that the best teams are put forward and they are in a position to exchange news, and where there are gray areas, they are in a position to harmonize their positions, and again they are able to insulate the civil service from most of these issues, because at the end of the day, they're still going to inherit the civil service or the public service the current administration will be leaving behind. And therefore, there should be less involvement or less interaction with them because they are still loyal to the government of the day. That aside, we expect that the various aspects of the program of the incoming government will now be attended to by the technocrats and bureaucrats and perhaps their think tanks to the extent that come May 29, they will hit the ground running. And we also hope that Nigerians' hopes and aspirations will be met. And at the end of the day, we'll be moving towards a better society, devoid of corruption, devoid of insurgents, devoid of other issues that have affected us as a nation or that have hindered our growth and development.
All right, let's get back to Ambassador here in Abuja. Ambassador, let's look at the composition of the committees. Of course, the federal government transition committee, the composition has been made public. It's chaired by the VP, Vice President, alongside the Minister of Finance and coordinating Minister of the Economy, the Minister of State Finance, and other heads of parastatals. Now, reports in the social media, hint on the composition of the committee on the side of the president-elect. He has hinted that he will not use politicians, but rather he would appoint technocrats. Now, my question is, how does the composition of the committee impact on the outcome of the transition itself?
Well, thank you very much. I think these issues you are raising are important. I always like to look at the bigger picture. The bigger picture here is Nigeria. And I would like to operate from what I have seen as a historian about our country, Nigeria. That is the unstoppability of Nigeria's global ascendancy. Now, if we have the correct attitude as people, it's not really the individual. It's not, without you, there will be no us. And so I think what we just need to do is to stop devaluing ourselves, is to have the right values. Nigeria, regardless of who it is, has the capacity to produce people who would ensure a seamless transition. And the names of the distinguished Nigerians you have mentioned on both sides, these people are in a very privileged position to be able to handle whatever challenges will arise in the transition process. So I have absolute confidence in their capacity to deliver on what we need to have a seamless and smooth transition from one administration to another. Because these names we have mentioned are great Nigerians. And don't forget what has happened has been flawless. We have to say it and praise that. If this had happened somewhere else, God, people would have been, but how many people have really applauded it apart from Nigerians and a few people from outside? But I think we need to begin to appreciate ourselves, have confidence in ourselves as a people. The salvation of this country is our responsibility. No one will do it for us. And I think the names of people that you have had, that you've just singled out and mentioned on the government side, are credible Nigerians, Nigerians with correct attitude who are capable of ensuring a seamless transition. On the other side of the platform, I have no doubt that they are fully aware of what has happened in our country and that the expectations that are high from Nigerians about what they are going to do. Don't forget, we don't talk about the positive narrative about Nigeria, we talk about the pathological narrative about Nigeria. This country is the biggest economy on the African continent. That's not a joke. This country has broken a record, has produced a president, as a sitting president, who has applauded his opponent in 15 years. So in terms of democratic expansion of space, there's not one political prisoner in jail in Nigeria at this time. This country of 376 nationalities have brought together a consensus in which a sitting government gives way to an opposition government to come in. So I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that we are witnessing a Nigeria that is destined for greatness. All we need to do as people is to begin to trust ourselves, have confidence in ourselves, begin to believe in ourselves, and not begin to see ourselves through prisons foisted on us by people and individuals who are only after their own selfish, narrow interests. Nigeria must come first, and I have no problem at all, and I think that the transition process is going to be smooth and seamless.
Let me stick with you, Ambassador, who might be. That's the point. We hear it often at the state level. When you have one government that is leaving, another one is coming, there are usually squabbles over the debt profile of that state. The outgoing government says, oh, we have, excuse me, we have so much in our kitty, but that's the credit. Let's say we have 100 million naira or 100 billion naira in our credit, and the incoming government says, or once it takes over, I said, no, this is the amount of debt that we have met, in the books. Now, how do we avert, situations like this? Because oftentimes it can send the wrong signals. I mean, you've been a chief accounting officer at the Federal Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There's a debt management office, but how? Because that's often a touchy point. So, look, how do you prepare the national balance sheet such that there's agreement on both sides, the outgoing and the incoming administration? Because it is the balance sheet that is agreed to by the parties that would then be a basis, as it were, for then assessing the new government once it takes off.
Well, I don't know of any, let me say there are only few Nigerians that will match the finance minister in terms of integrity and accountability at this time. And the figures are very transparent. This was the woman who, for the first time, began to publish how much allocation is given to all the constituencies in Nigeria, the local governments in this country, so that anyone can see. So I think it's a matter of transparency and putting all the cards on the table for all to see. And I think this is doable for us as Nigerians. Let me just speak to the issue of corruption. Corruption is not a program. Corruption is not a development project. corruption, you must look at corruption from a cause and an effect paradigm. What people who are corrupt do is they're exploiting shortages, disadvantages that they suffer, and they are full of insecurity. So I recognize the huge challenge that we face on that platform, but I don't think corruption is a program. It's not a development program. Corruption is a consequence of deficiencies in a system which have to be addressed from an institutional point of view, but also from a developmental point of view. So I just wanted to say this, that we must focus on addressing the problems of shortages that we have in this country, the development challenges, and not see corruption as a vision, as a program to fight. The way that I've seen corruption be parodied in our country is that it is a mantra that is used to try to pass moral judgment on our race as a people. And when you say, oh, you are saying Nigerians are corrupt, you are trying to brand them and speak morally about them. No one on earth, no society on earth does not have its own challenges in terms of this. And we must begin to look at ourselves in a more positive way than just as being epitomes of corruption. So again, to return to your main question, I think let us just have confidence in the team that we have. Dr. Okonjo-Iweala has a huge history, a credibility platform on which she would deliver in terms of actual figures. And books are open. These days, nothing can be hidden. If you say this is what you have, there are documents that will show you that that's what you have. And you can cross-check this anywhere in the world. So my appeal again is to ride on my old hobby horse, that we should have confidence in ourselves.
Okay, let's get back to Dr. Fasi Yusuf in Lagos. Doctor, let's look at the process, the transition process in itself. Both leaders, that's the incumbent president and the president-elect, have both assured of a peaceful, smooth transition. Now, that gives the impression that things could go the other way. So, what would constitute a proper transition? What is the level of responsibility that both transition committees, have?
I think we must get it right. The point must be made that there must not be any room for suspicion, mutual suspicion. They must learn, the two teams must learn to believe in what each other is saying, and where there is some divergence, they will try as much as possible to clarify. And again, the incoming government knows that the popular mandate it got, it cannot afford not to deliver. And the outgoing government also, we want to leave some credibility behind. And therefore, the records will have to be straightened up. The documentation will have to be such that they are easily verifiable. And they are such that every Nigerian will not have any cause to raise any dust about the handover briefs or notes. And at the end of the day, the country will be in a position to move forward from where the current administration will be stopping on May 29. We have just 44 days to go, and I believe that a lot of job will have to be done between now and then. And it's not going to be an easy task. It's not going to be a tea party for the two teams. And I like to believe that the nation at the end of the day will be the better for it.
Let's rejoin Professor Yakub at the Sokoto Network Center. Dr. Fasi Yusuf was already speaking to the challenges to expect. Now, the purpose of preparing the handover notes and the interface between the two transition teams, that of the outgoing and that of the incoming, is to get the paperwork ready. And of course, once you have the paperwork ready, you have the information on the basis of which to take off. That is probably the easiest part. The more difficult will be from May 29th. Now, what do you envisage as, a guiding post, if you like, for the incoming administration? General Buhari has been out of effective governance, with the exception of his role at the PTF. He's been out for over 30 years. What would you expect? What should be the guiding post for him?
I think the most important thing is for him to understand that he contested under the platform of a political party, and that this party had its own manifesto, which is sold to Nigerians, and which also I think Nigerians have bought into, and that was why the party was voted into power, or is going to be, it's voted into power. So therefore, the starting point should be, what did I actually promise in my manifesto, party's manifesto, to do for Nigerians? And looking at the way the campaigns went on, I think the APC presidential candidate, the president-elect, actually, was very emphatic on a number of issues that he thought, and also I think Nigerians thought that should be the driving force of his administration. So these ones will include, the intent on, dealing with the issue of insecurity. There is also the problem of, tackling unemployment. There is the issue of, of corruption, and the fact that there is also the question of unemployment. These are very critical issues that disturb or afflict or confront Nigeria at the moment. And I think for me, he has actually squarely, defined what should be the focus of the administration. And just to to differ briefly, with the retired ambassador. I don't think the issue of corruption, should be treated as if it is not a developmental issue. But even when he made his analysis, he also brought the issue of development. If corruption is so significant in the Nigerian context as a result of, what he termed, inadequacy of facilities or resources, then I think it is a matter of how do we design a program of either economic development that will look into this very critically. Corruption is actually a very serious, problem, and which has been allowed to fester for so long in this country that a lot of opportunities for development in the country have also been missed. And I think that, for the APC incoming government to put this on the front burner of the administration's focus, I think it's something that we'll have to really commend. It must be addressed. For me, actually, if you solve the problem of corruption, we can, because the corruption issue, it has tentacles. It has tentacles, it affects every facet of this country's life. Now, there is also the dimension of energy, which he has also talked about. And I also think that if you are able to address corruption, there's corruption in the energy sector, there's corruption in the industrial sector, there's corruption in the education sector, and so on and so forth. And an attempt to actually solve this, especially with the cooperation of Nigerians, it is what I think will allow the regime to stay focused and to be able to also address other issues that have been enumerated in the campaign issues that he raised throughout the breadth and country, the length and breadth of this country. So I believe that the government, has already precisely defined for itself what it has to do, in order to see that Nigeria is taken to the next level. And indeed, if these issues are not tackled, I believe and I'm convinced that that actually will also be the problem that the regime will have to encounter in terms of showcasing its own track record within the next 4 years. So issues are already defined, and I fully support what the government intends to do. And we hope, as I keep on saying, that Nigerians will also give the regime the kind of support that is required. I agree totally with other speakers that the bigger picture is Nigeria, not individuals. Indeed, it's not individuals, and the bigger picture, therefore, is the one which we should all work towards and ensure that at the end of the day, it is Nigeria that is actually placed, on the right footing for everybody, all of us. We have just as Buhari said, in 1984 when he took over, we have no other country but Nigeria to claim as our country. And he has the opportunity now. Of course, he's been out of power, for a very long time. But the experience he had before, and also his integrity, and also his resolve, as well as the parties, the political parties' platform that he's used, I think are some of the indicators that actually promise to give him, the opportunity to actually address the issues that confront Nigeria.
Professor Nuhu Yakub, Vice Chancellor, Sokoto State University, we thank you for your perspectives. Thank you very much for coming on the program. All right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. We still have our guest in Lagos Network Center that's talking about Dr. Fasi Yusuf, and of course Ambassador Martin Uhomohi is already here in the studio. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll continue with our conversation.
This is still Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We are discussing the transition from the outgoing to the incoming administrations. In 44 days, President Goodluck Jonathan will hand over to General Muhammadu Buhari, who won the March 28th elections. We're discussing issues pertaining to matters that are attendant to the transition. We still have two guests, as Claire said, at the Lagos Network Center, right here with us at the Abuja studios. Ambassador Uomoebi, let's take a look at another aspect that I believe Nigerians should be interested in, and indeed both administrations, incoming and outgoing. Namely, we have complaints in the past of significant reports and recommendations gathering dust on the shelves of government. But there are at least 2 or 3 such reports that should be of keen interest. Let me first reference the Oronsaye report, namely on the rationalization of the functions and activities of MDAs. That's one. Second point has to do with the 600+ recommendations of the national conference that took place last year. In the course of electioneering, the federal government did say, of President Goodluck Jonathan, that the Federal Executive Council had passed those recommendations. A committee was earlier set up, and they would implement the report. And of course, we also have the amendments to the Constitution, which we read in the papers today, that President Goodluck Jonathan has withheld his assent to the amendments on account of non-compliance, he says, with the strict provisions of aspects of the Constitution. These 3 critical reports, how should the outgoing and incoming administrations view them as templates, for dealing with some of our core national challenges?
As a country, we have, if you look at our history, we have constituted several committees, and reports and reports and reports are all over the place. Right. The challenge has been, of course, implementing those reports. I believe that the particular one dealing with the national conference is a critical one. You recall that when that conference was launched, there was a great deal of skepticism and doubt that nothing good will come out of that conference. And in fact, it was going to result in an implosion of the political space in our country. But that conference, thanks to the leadership that was executed by government and those who took responsibility for that conference, it came out seamless and was very useful. I think the incoming government should take that report very seriously because it reflects what Nigerians think their country must be. The unity of Nigeria is not contested, it's not an issue. But how to make that unity work? This is the first time that we have a report of that extent with such an elaborate provision for how to make the country work even better. So I would want to humbly commend that the incoming government must advance the steps that have been taken already by the President Jonathan administration to implement that report. Reconstitution that brought us into existence in 1999, of course, took off from the 1979 Constitution. But this is the one that reflects contemporary situation in our country, talking about autonomies and distribution of powers and maintaining balance between all the nationalities that make our country and what issues are most dear to the heart of Nigerians. So I think really the government needs to take that, incoming government needs to take that very seriously. With regards to the more or less bureaucratic one, the Oronsoyan report, there were very positive recommendations in that report, but there were also reports there that I think required further reflection. And so I think the incoming government might want to, depending on what it says, I promised Nigeria in its manifesto, because the manifesto of the administration is very critical. That will be the basis on which Nigerians will assess them 4 years from now. You said you were going to do this. Have you delivered on this? So I expect that this incoming government will be looking at its own manifesto against the backdrop of all of these reports that we have and see how they can reconcile them and move our country forward. The beneficiary of all of this is, of course, Nigeria, an ascendant Nigeria. And that must become the galvanizer of every thought and actions that this administration will take.
And former Secretary to the State Government, Plateau State. Thank you very much for joining us on the program, Mr. Gomos.
Good morning.
Quickly look at the slogan of the, of course, incoming government, the party APC. The slogan is change. Now, if the incoming government, goes by its slogan, then we might see a radical change in both government policies and programs. To what extent can the committee, transition committee, influence, the composition and decisions of government?
The starting point would be, like earlier said, somebody earlier said on the panel there, that the composition of the transition committee on the incoming government side will clearly determine the kind of things they would do vis-a-vis the information they receive from the outgoing government. I believe that the president-elect will select a number of credible people that would not only receive these briefings, but will study it clearly and detailed and see what aspects of governance they would want to continue and what aspects of government they would definitely want to change, because like you said, the slogan change was the selling. So obviously a lot of things would change, either the processes and procedures of running government or some policies, wholesale policies must also change. So the composition of the transition committee from the incoming side would have to be very carefully chosen to include people that would study in detail and see what is being done today that can be retained and that can be built upon, and what is being done today that did not deliver to the expectations of Nigerians and that would not work in tandem with the manifesto of the incoming government. I think that's a starting point. Another starting point also is the quality of briefings, which are not normally in transition program, in the transition notes. Handover notes are documents that are dusted from previous handover notes, and there are reports of what government has done. But there's something called briefings, the briefings that a president will give to his incoming colleague. These briefings are first like the security briefings that will be given, Secondly, there are financial briefings that will be given. These are also very, very critical information that will have to be digested, and the president-elect will have to reflect upon it and see what fits into his incoming his administration and manifesto, and what does not fit in. And he has to be able to distill the ones that don't fit in so that the change mantra would be sustained.
Almost. As you said, the points you've made are very useful, and our other guests have also hinted at the fact that what we are seeing here, the core interest is that of Nigeria and Nigerians, and the transition is significant for a number of reasons. Let's take a look at this. You've mentioned the fact that there has to be some briefing session between the outgoing president and the incoming president. I think a couple of weeks ago, President Goodluck Jonathan Nigeria Muhammadu Buhari had a private meeting. In some other democracies, like US, for instance, that's what is called a president's club, comprising the former presidents. Now, in Nigeria, what we have is a council of state, which is a very large body. Can we begin to think of a situation where, taking Nigeria at the core of our collective interests, where we might have a semblance of a president's club, where we have nothing else but, nobody else rather, but former heads of state, after the confidential briefing between the outgoing and the incoming, they sit around a table and then begin to discuss the issues and take Nigeria at the forefront of the agenda, no matter the squabbles that preceded the elections.
Yes, I in one fora, I had always said that the nature of the political process in Nigeria, especially the electioneering process, puts a huge divide between outgoing and incoming government, sometimes even within the same party. And that's not healthy for Nigeria. It's not healthy for the country. And so what you're saying is something that we think is very good going forward. This is the first time, yes, that a party different is taking over power at the center and in some states. But I think we should recognize that the Nigerian space will not go away. The Nigerian people will still be there, and government will still be there. So whether it's APC coming in, a PDP going out, the Nigerian space will not change. So it's good for the president coming in and the outgoing president to have a fora where, including other former presidents, of course, where they would meet either on quarterly basis and to be able to look at the Nigeria issue, not APC issue alone. And of course, General Buhari would be able to ask the outgoing president, how did you handle this issue without the media celebration of the Council of State meeting being around? How do you discuss this issue? What worked for you here? What did not work for you here? In privacy, with only their ears listening, I think that he would talk frankly at that moment. But the moment we take it out to the media and make it a circus, like Council of States, of course, everybody would want to get to pander onto his supporters and want to show that he's in charge and he's doing the right thing. So we won't get honest and sincere advice about how to help this country.
Okay, Mr. Gomo, staying with you, what areas might you find, contentious between both parties?
One key area that would be very contentious would be the treasury, the state of the treasury, in terms of, like earlier on, you mentioned earlier that squabbles normally happen even within the same party when one party is taking over and one government is entering. There's always that squabble about how much money was left in the treasury, how much debt or level of debt the country incurred, and these are areas that would be contentious. Another area that would be contentious would be agreements and contracts that have been signed by an outgoing government, and if they do not fit into the big picture of the incoming government, usually there would be some contentious issues there, because and it's all over the world. We see in the U.S., even the U.S., the Iran nuclear deal that was signed recently, the Congress, the incoming Congress is shouting that when we get into power, when we come in, we're going to look, when he comes back home, we're going to look at it. After all, Obama is a sitting duck president, a lame duck president. He doesn't have the power to implement this agreement. So long-term agreements are issues of contention that would definitely have to be smoothened out clearly. And another issue is what you also raised up, pending issues that have national significance, like the Confab report, like the Oronsai report. These are issues. You recall that APC as a party boycotted this Confab, deliberately stayed away from the national conference. And so now the report is going to fall in the laps of President Buhari. Would he sincerely want to implement the report wholesale without a deep sense of reflection? that is left to be, that's an issue of conjuncture. For the sake of Nigeria, of course, people expect him to come in and take the report and inherit it as his own, as also his project. But sometimes some people want to say, okay, give me 3 months or 6 months to study it and see whether it fits my government. I think one final issue of contention will be projects and programs. Projects and programs flow out from manifestos and from agendas or from agendas of government. And if the transformation agenda has a number of projects and programs that are dear to it and was pursuing it to the fullest. Now, the APC government might have a different glass or a different prism to look at such programs. And they might have immediately some sparks to start flying about the implementation or sustainability of such programs. And I think this is in a period, that's why you have transition programs. This is a period for both parties to look at them clearly. What may help, and I think I want to suggest this, that apart from the transition committees themselves, the incoming government should have what's called a think tank, which is working quietly behind these transition committees. So whatever you report, all these likely contentious issues, the think tank should be able to discuss scenarios and what's the best case scenario for this, what's the worst case scenario for this, and advise the incoming president so that he doesn't have to wait till he has been sworn in before the sparks start flying. Right before the outgoing government goes, they should be able to smoothen out these areas so that the sparks don't fly.
Mr. Gomo, so I just want to ask you this last question. Ambassador is still here with us, and Dr. Fasi Yusuf is still with us at the Lagos Network Center. They've been speaking in response to the questions that were asked. They may also wish to respond to this, but after you. Namely, we also have situations in the past, and this is more common usually at the state level. Now, President Goodluck Jonathan, up until the 28th of May, is President of the Federal Republic. And therefore, all his actions will be legal. Actions flowing from his power and authority will be deemed to be legal. And this will include appointments and the authority, to enter into contracts on behalf of the Federal Republic. But we have seen, usually at the state level, a last-minute rush to award all kinds of contracts, to have all kinds of... And usually when the incoming administration takes over, it says, look, these are not things that will be bound by. But those appointments are either deleted or annulled. What would you advise in this particular instance?
Yes, when our democracy was still was about a few years old, I mean, those are classic examples of people cleaning the slate when they come into office. But I think we're beginning to mature. And my advice to the incoming administration to look at those being appointed are not from the moon. They are part and parcel of the state society where the appointments come from. And if they are good enough, and if they are going to serve the state, why not? I mean, it's a question of telling them to sing a new song and don't just clean them out without care. But at the same time, my advice also to outgoing governments not to rush, unless if the appointments are critical, unless if they would fill a gap that would have to cause material problems with the state. I mean, what's a matter of 2 months? Why can't you wait and let the new guy take a closer look at it from the point of view of his manifesto? So there shouldn't be a rush just because you are still president, but there should be you have to consider the guy coming in too. And also on the other side, you don't have to clean the slate just because you're an incoming government. You must look at the fact that the state or the country is bigger than the individual or bigger than a political party.
Okay, let's get back to Ambassador. Ambassador, I don't know. This is a layman's question. Now, the transition committee on the side of the president-elect, the incoming government, will they be made to take the oath of office before before being privy to the government document, which are, of course, a very top secret document?
Well, I don't have any special skills in this, but I don't expect there will be any oath of office to be taken as members of the transition committee. I wouldn't expect that. The people who an incoming government and an outgoing government will invite to such forums who must be people of integrity and proven capacity to deliver on what is best for our country. So I have no experience on that, but I don't expect that there will be any formal ceremonies of swearing in and taking oaths of office. But again, just to say that our country makes me when I think about Nigeria, I'm indeed very satisfied at the huge progress that we have made as a nation and as a people. If that is all I can say through the opportunity that you have given me, I just want to let Nigerians know this. And too, we must stop this practice of vilifying ourselves at all times. And I'm sorry to say that our elites are the most guilty of this. Those who have benefited most from this country take so much pleasure in vilifying and castigating and abusing ourselves. We need to stop that. We need to thank God for who we are and what we are as a people.
Well, Ambassador, that's one point I would like you to address, namely our foreign relations. What are the key markers that both the outgoing and then the incoming administrations should take a look at? Because from what you have said, the vilification of Nigeria and Nigerians by the Nigerian elite has created an image problem for us outside. But there are other matters. Of course, you were an ambassador and then you retired as permanent secretary of the foreign ministry. What are the key markers we have to take a look at in terms of Nigeria's interest and Nigeria's place in the world?
Yes, that comes now to my direct purview. Nigeria is a country on this continent that has played a unique role in the history of the African continent since it became independent in 1960. There is so much expectation from other African countries about Nigeria. And indeed, I might say, by the members of the international community, even those from outside our country. It is not the same when you speak as a Nigerian and when you do not speak as a Nigerian and you come from our continent. To whom much is given, much is expected. And I'm very proud of how this country has demonstrated its leadership qualities and role since 1960. Nigeria has never sat on the back stage in any matter that deals with this continent and indeed in the world, particularly in the area of peacekeeping and maintaining global peace and security. That is one mark that has been sustained in our history from 1960 up until 2015, thanks to the leadership that we have got, regardless of whether they are military or whether they are civilian. That needs to be sustained. Secondly, Nigeria at this time has emerged as the biggest economy on the continent. And the African continent is the new frontier, as you rightly know. The indications are that if the growth content of Nigeria is maintained, in the next 20 years, we will in fact become an African China. And what a great responsibility that will imply for our foreign relations. So in our foreign policy, we must continue to prioritize on economic diplomacy, on attracting foreign direct investment into our country. One thing that was ensured in the last couple of years was to ensure that every presidential delegation must have an investment forum as part of that delegation. This will make sure that when the political discussions are taking place, the business, the private sector people in our countries are creating jobs and putting food on the table of the average Nigerian.
All right.
So our political ambitions must complement our economic interests.
All right, Ambassador, we would like to thank you. But the last question to you, Dr. Fasi Yusuf in Lagos. Now, Ambassador here believes that rather than take the oath of office, integrity of those to be appointed into the transition committee should speak for them. My question to you is, how can we ensure that the secrecy of the government's document is not compromised?
Well, I think first of all, it must be stated that the Constitution does not emphasize that issue you were trying to raise. The oath of secrecy will not apply to those in the transition committee on either side. And what is important is to see government as a continuum, and that there should be no lacuna in government. Those appointed by the government that is going out are already known. Those appointed, or those being appointed by the incoming administration should normally be, as we said here, technocrats, bureaucrats, people of proven integrity, people who are above board in every material respect. And we also expect that if there's any gray area, they go back to their master, in case of the incoming government, to report, and he thinks I've been there, we've been in a position to analyze the various issues, and if there's any need for the incoming president to take it up with the outgoing president, they will meet. And I also want to make a point that the issue, the makers of the Constitution, they knew what they were doing by bringing in former Chief Justices of the Federation as members of the National Council of State. And I think because these were the people that interpreted the Constitution at various times, and they're in a position to advise the government on the right thing to do, so that they are not in conflict with the Constitution and the law of the country. And I also want to state that the issue of corruption is all pervasive, because corruption diminishes democracy, and also corruption is systemic. And without tackling corruption, no administration can really succeed. One of the things used against the outgoing administration is a lackluster approach to the issue of to tackling corruption. And the incoming administration has said that much, that corruption will be a cornerstone of his program. Because we have political corruption, we have economic corruption, we have educational corruption, we have religious corruption, we have moral corruption, we have corruption in every dimension. So we expect that those to be appointed will be like Caesar's wife. They should be above board. That is, those that will be serving the transition committee of the incoming administration, because they must be seen and they must be known to be people that are above board, not people that you want to question their integrity or question their moral character, or you want to say that, look, they don't know what they're doing. And again, it's too early in the day. What's this incoming administration going to say? They're talking about corruption, and on the basis of that, people elected them to bring about change. And look at the composition of the transition committee, people of questionable character. And I think God will forbid a situation where we're going to have that. And above all, we must see ourselves as a nation in an order to develop. And for us to develop, we must put all these things in proper perspective and decide that, look, yes, the outgoing administration has done its best, but we can always improve on what it has done. And I also want to...
Okay, well, I was just going to say, Claire, that we'll listen to Dr. Fasa Yusuf there from our Lagos Network Center. While thanking him, I think that the business of the transition committees on both sides would be, President Goodluck Jonathan's administration always said, look, he wasn't interested in show trials as a mechanism for fighting corruption. Rather, it was interested in institutional reforms. Now we have institutions that are established to deal with issues of corruption. EFCC is there. What's your report? What is your status report? ICPC is there. What is your status report? And then we also have the Code of Conduct Bureau, Code of Conduct Tribunal. What is your status report? And they take it from there. Dr. Fasa Yusuf from the Lagos Network Center, thank you for being with us on the program today. And also would like to thank Mr. Ezekiel Gomos, former Secretary to the Plateau State Government and current Director of the Just Business School. Thank you for your very illuminating perspectives on the program this morning. And also here with us in the Abuja studios, Ambassador Martin Uhomoebi, former Permanent Secretary, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Thank you for coming as well.
It's my pleasure.
Okay. This is Good Morning Nigeria, still on the network service of the Nigerian television. Now to one of our companion segments, which is sports. And here is Musbah Udan Wahab, who's giving us some trending stories in the world of sports.
Okay, welcome here. Let's talk sport now. We'll begin from the NBA as Orlando Magic's guard Victor Oladipo shines, even as his team